Sandra stood frozen in her doorway at 2:47 a.m., her phone trembling in her hand as she watched the security footage replay for the 7th time. The shadow that walked through her compound wasn't human. It had no face, no form, just darkness that moved with purpose. And behind it, crawling on all fours like a wounded animal, was something that made her blood run cold. She had paid 1.5 million naira for this beautiful apartment. But beauty, as her grandmother used to say, can be the devil's finest disguise. What she didn't know was that every tenant who had ever lived in that compound had one thing in common. They all left with nothing but the clothes on their backs, and she was about to find out why. Before we continue with what happened next, if you are finding this story compelling, consider subscribing. We post new documentaries every week, and your support allows us to keep bringing you these deeply researched cases. Now, back to the story. Port Harcourt, the Garden City of Nigeria, January 2024, where oil money flows like the rivers that gave the city its name, and dreams are built on contracts signed in air-conditioned offices. This is where Sandra Okafor's story begins, not with a tragedy, but with hope. Sandra was a woman of 32 years, a project manager at an international oil servicing company. She had spent the last 8 years of her life building her career in Abuja, living in a modest 2-bedroom flat, saving money, and planning for a future that seemed just within reach. She wasn't wealthy, not by Port Harcourt standards where people measured success in properties and luxury cars, but she was comfortable. Inwayin Wereisi, the Igbo would call her, a woman with sense, a woman who had her life together. Her transfer to Port Harcourt came with a promotion, senior project manager, 30% salary increase, a chance to be closer to the field to prove herself to the directors who made decisions in Lagos. She had accepted immediately, her heart racing with excitement as she called her fiancé, Shidi, to share the news. "Baby, this is it," she had squealed into the phone, pacing around her small Abuja apartment. "This is our breakthrough. 2 more years and we will have enough for our own house. Our wedding can be even bigger than we planned." Chidi's deep voice had rumbled with pride through the speaker. "I told you your hard work would pay off, Ifoma. My good thing. Port Harcourt is ready for you, and I'll be there every weekend until we fix our wedding date. 6 months, Sandra. Just 6 more months and you become Mrs. Okonkwo." She had laughed, crying tears of joy, staring at the engagement ring on her finger, a modest but beautiful piece that Chidi had saved for months to buy. They had been together for 3 years, and their wedding date was set for August 2024. Everything was falling into place. But first, she needed a place to live. The house hunting began in mid-January. Sandra had contacted an agent through a colleague's recommendation, a sharp-dressed man named Mr. Bassi, who drove a clean Honda Accord and spoke with the confidence of someone who had closed many deals. "Madam, I have the perfect place for you," he had said during their first phone call. "Modern, secure, in a good area, GRA Phase 2. The kind of place that makes a statement about who you are." That Saturday, Mr. Bassi picked her up from her hotel and drove her through the streets of Port Harcourt. Sandra watched the city pass by, the controlled chaos of the roundabouts, the impressive mansions with high walls, the street vendors selling everything from plantain chips to phone chargers. Finally, they turned into a quiet street lined with tall trees and compound walls painted in various colors. "Here we are," Mr. Bassi announced, pulling up to a gate painted pristine white. The moment Sandra stepped out of the car, she was impressed. The compound wall was high and well maintained. Bougainvillea flowers cascaded over the top in shades of pink and purple. The gate was modern, automated with an intercom system. Mr. Bassi pressed the buzzer, and within seconds, a security guard opened it. What Sandra saw next took her breath away. The compound was immaculate. The main building was a 3-story structure divided into 6 self-contained apartments, 2 on each floor. The exterior was painted in brilliant white with grey accents. Every window had modern burglary-proof bars. The compound itself was paved with interlocking stones, and a small garden with trimmed hedges sat in one corner. It looked like something out of an architecture magazine. "This is beautiful," Sandra whispered, following Mr. Bassi to the second-floor apartment. When he opened the door to the 2-bedroom flat, Sandra's decision was made before she even toured all the rooms. The floors were covered in spotless white tiles that reflected the afternoon sun. The walls were perfectly screeded and painted in soft cream. The POP ceiling had elegant designs, waves and curves that gave the space a luxurious feel. The kitchen had granite countertops. The bathroom had modern fixtures and a bathtub. "How much?" Sandra asked, already imagining her furniture arranged in the spacious living room. 1.5 million naira per year, Mr. Bassi said smoothly. Service charge included, security, waste disposal, compound maintenance, everything covered. Sandra's mental calculator went into overdrive. With her new salary, it was affordable. Tight, but affordable. And this place was worth it. This was the kind of home that said she had arrived, that her hard work had paid off. "I'll take it," she said, perhaps a bit too quickly. Mr. Bassi smiled, the kind of smile that should have made her pause, but didn't. "Wonderful choice, madam. The landlord will be very pleased. Let me get the documents ready." What Sandra didn't do, what would haunt her in the coming months, was ask questions. She didn't ask why such a beautiful, well-located apartment was available immediately with no waiting list. She didn't ask to speak with other tenants. She didn't research the compound or the landlord. Sandra woke up on a Tuesday morning, feeling as though someone had drained all the life from her body. Her head pounded, her joints ached, her stomach churned with nausea. She tried to sit up, but fell back against her pillow, dizzy and weak. Food poisoning, she thought, reaching for her phone to call in sick. Must have been that shawarma yesterday. But by evening, she had developed a fever that made her delirious. Chidi, on the phone, insisted she go to the hospital immediately. A colleague drove her to a private clinic in GRA. The doctor ran tests. Malaria, negative. Typhoid, negative. Blood pressure, normal. Blood sugar, normal. Everything was normal. "Mrs. Okafor," the doctor said, reviewing her results with a confused frown. "Medically, I can't find anything wrong with you, but clearly you are unwell. I'll admit you for observation and put you on IV fluids and broad-spectrum antibiotics." Sandra spent 2 days in that hospital bed, drifting in and out of feverish sleep. By the 3rd day, as mysteriously as it had come, the illness vanished. She woke up feeling perfectly fine, as if nothing had happened. "Stress," the doctor concluded when discharging her. "Your body is adjusting to the move, new job pressure, different environment. Take it easy." Sandra returned to her apartment, relieved but confused. The medical bills had cost her 180,000 naira, money she hadn't budgeted for. But she was fine now. That was what mattered. Exactly 7 days later, it happened again. Same symptoms, same debilitating weakness, same trip to the hospital, same test results, nothing wrong. Same mysterious recovery after 2 days. "This doesn't make sense," Sandra told Chidi over the phone, her voice cracking with frustration. "How can I be this sick and have nothing wrong with me?" "Maybe you need to see a specialist," Chidi suggested. "A better hospital. We can't keep spending money like this with no answers." But when it happened a 3rd time, precisely 7 days after the 2nd episode, Sandra began to feel a different kind of fear. this wasn't medical. This was something else. By the end of March, she had been sick 4 times, 4 hospital visits, over 600,000 naira spent on medical bills. Her savings were draining fast, and her health insurance was beginning to flag her case as suspicious. Too many unexplained illnesses in too short a time. What terrified her most was the pattern. Every 7th day, like clockwork, as if her body was following a schedule written by someone or something else. The second blow came in early April. Chidi's visits had become less frequent. At first, Sandra attributed it to work. He was busy, she was busy. Port Harcourt to Abuja was expensive to travel every weekend. But then, the phone calls became shorter. The voice notes stopped. The goodnight messages came later and later until they stopped coming at all. "Chidi, are you avoiding me?" Sandra asked during one of their rare phone conversations. Her voice carried a tremor she couldn't hide. There was a long pause, too long. "Sandra, I don't know how to say this." Her heart dropped. "Say what?" "I don't think this is working anymore. Us, the distance. You're always sick, always stressed. Every time we talk, it's about hospitals and bills and problems. I need space." "Space?" Sandra's voice rose. "We're getting married in 4 months. What do you mean you need space?" "That's just it, Sandra. I don't think I'm ready for marriage anymore. Not like this. You've changed since you moved. You're not the same woman I proposed to." Tears blurred her vision. "Changed? Chidi, I'm sick. I need your support, not your accusations." "I'm sorry," he said, and his voice was distant, cold. "I think we should cancel the wedding. I'll send back the money your family contributed. This isn't what I signed up for." "Chidi, please." The line went dead. Sandra sat in stunned silence, staring at her phone. 3 years. 3 years of love, laughter, plans, dreams, gone. Ended in a 5-minute phone call. She looked at her engagement ring, remembering the day he had proposed. On her birthday, in front of her family, his hands trembling as he knelt. She remembered his promises, his vows, his certainty that she was the one. What had changed? How had 3 months in Port Harcourt unraveled everything they had built? For days, Sandra couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. She called Chidi repeatedly, sent messages, begged him to reconsider. But his responses became shorter until they stopped entirely. By mid-April, he had blocked her number. The wedding venue had to be cancelled. The caterer, the cake maker, the photographer, every call was a fresh wound. Every cancelled vendor a reminder of what she had lost. Her family was devastated. Her mother cried on the phone, asking what had happened, why Chidi had abandoned her. Sandra had no answers. She sat in her beautiful apartment, the place that was supposed to represent her success, and felt like a complete failure. "Ngwa ano ya na ogba noso, mobun kaoje ije kaoge ji mara ebe osi." When an animal runs, it should know where it's running from. But Sandra didn't know. She was running from something, being chased by something, and she had no idea what it was. The final blow came in May, swift and devastating. Sandra had been struggling at work since March. The constant illnesses meant missed meetings, delayed projects, frustrated clients. She tried to keep up, working late into the night, sending emails at 3 a.m., overcompensating for every absence. But it wasn't enough. Her supervisor called her into his office on a Monday morning. His face was apologetic but firm. "Sandra, we need to talk about your performance." She sat down, her stomach knotting with dread. "I know you've been dealing with health issues," he continued, "and the company has been very understanding, but we're running a business. The Agbami project fell behind because you missed 3 crucial client meetings. The Bonga proposal had errors because you submitted it while you were unwell. We can't continue like this." "Sir, I can do better," Sandra said quickly. "I'll work harder. "We've decided to terminate your employment," he said, sliding a letter across the desk. "Effective immediately. You'll receive 2 months severance, and the company will provide a reference letter stating you resigned voluntarily."
Sandra stared at the letter, the words blaring through her tears. "But my promotion, I just moved here." "I'm sorry, Sandra. The decision is final." She walked out of that office in a daze, her colleagues avoiding eye contact as she packed her desk into a cardboard box. 3 months ago, she had arrived with dreams of advancement, of building a future. Now she was living with nothing but a box of personal items and a severance package that wouldn't even cover 1 more month's rent. By the time she reached her apartment, reality had set in. No job, no fiancé, no savings, depleted by hospital bills, no health, no hope. Sandra collapsed on her couch and wept, the kind of deep, soul-crushing tears that come when everything you've worked for crumbles to dust in your hands. For the first time since moving in, she looked around her beautiful apartment and saw it for what it really was: a cage. A golden cage with POP ceilings and marble floors, but a cage nonetheless. That night, as she lay in bed unable to sleep, she heard her neighbor through the thin walls. A man's voice, angry and desperate. "How can a mechanic not find what's wrong with my car? I've spent 400,000 naira in 2 months. It's possessed, I tell you. That car is possessed." Sandra sat up, listening. Another voice, a woman, filtered through from the apartment below. "The fire investigation said there was no electrical fault, no gas leak, nothing. But my shop burned to ashes, everything I owned. How does that happen?" Sandra's heart began to race. She got up and went to her balcony, looking down at the compound. It was nearly midnight, but lights were on in almost every apartment. She could hear voices, arguments, crying, frustration. How many other people in this compound were suffering? How many had lost things too? A chill ran down her spine as she remembered the agent, Mr. Bassi, and his smooth smile. The landlord she had never met, the too good to be true apartment, the lack of questions asked. "God," she whispered into the night, "what have I gotten myself into?" Sunday morning, May 19th, 2024. Sandra hadn't been to church since she moved to Port Harcourt. Too sick, too depressed, too ashamed. But desperation has a way of bringing people back to God. Christ Holy Church International was a large congregation in GRA, known for their powerful prayer sessions and prophetic ministry. Sandra had heard about them from a former colleague. That morning, she woke up with a single thought: I need answers. The service was intense, the kind where the presence of God feels thick in the air, where people weep openly and prayers sound like warfare. Sandra sat in the back, trying to make herself small. But when the prophet called for people dealing with mysterious afflictions and unexplained losses, her feet moved before her mind could stop them. She found herself at the altar with about 20 other people, kneeling on the carpet as the prophet, a tall man in flowing white robes, walked among them, praying. When he reached Sandra, he stopped. His hand touched her head gently, and then he began to speak in a voice that wasn't quite his own, deeper, more authoritative. "My daughter," he said, his eyes still closed, "you are under siege. The ground you walk on daily is cursed. The walls that shelter you are gates of affliction. There is a landlord who has made a covenant with darkness. He has buried things in that compound, items of witchcraft, fetish objects that bind every tenant to poverty and suffering." Sandra's body trembled. "He feeds on your losses," the prophet continued, his voice rising.
Every tenant who becomes poor, every business that fails, every relationship that breaks, it strengthens him. He grows richer while you grow poorer. It is a spiritual exchange, a wicked altar that drinks the destiny of everyone who sleeps under that roof. The church had gone silent except for gasps and murmurs of Jesus and deliver her Lord. But God says he is about to expose him, the prophet declared. You will not leave that place empty-handed. You will be the one to break the curse. You will be the one to bring light into that darkness. But you must be strong. You must pray. You must not run in fear. Stay and fight, for this battle is the Lord's. When Sandra opened her eyes, she was lying on the floor, tears streaming down her face, her body shaking from the weight of the revelation. Church members surrounded her, praying in tongues, declaring freedom and deliverance. As she left the church that afternoon, Sandra felt two things simultaneously: terror at what she now knew, and determination to do something about it. But what could she do against a landlord with supernatural power? What could she do against witchcraft and buried fetishes? The answer came from an unlikely source. Sandra began to pay attention, really pay attention, to her neighbors. The man upstairs, Mr. Kenneth, had moved in with 3 luxury cars. Within 4 months, all 3 were gone. His business, a logistics company, had collapsed after a major client accused him of fraud he didn't commit. Now he was selling his furniture piece by piece just to eat. The Uber driver, Tunde, had his car at the mechanic every single week. Unexplained engine failures, transmission problems, electrical faults. He finally sold it at a loss and now worked as a dispatch rider, barely making ends meet. Emeka, the clothing merchant, had lost his entire shop to a mysterious fire in March. No electrical fault, no gas leak, just fire that consumed everything in minutes, while neighboring shops remained untouched. And the woman below Sandra's apartment, Mrs. Ifeoma, had been trying to get pregnant for 2 years. 7 miscarriages. Doctors found nothing wrong. There were 12 apartments in the compound. All 12 tenants had similar stories of sudden, unexplained decline. But the most disturbing thing happened at night. Sandra had noticed it first in late April, but dismissed it as exhaustion-induced hallucinations. Around 2 a.m. every night, she would hear footsteps in the compound. Slow, deliberate footsteps that seemed to walk the entire perimeter. And accompanying it, a baby crying. Not a normal baby's cry, but something off, something wrong, too deep, too rhythmic, like a recording played on a loop. One night, unable to sleep, Sandra looked out her window and froze. There was something moving in the compound, a shadow darker than the surrounding darkness, gliding across the pavement. It had no discernible form, just presence. And behind it, crawling on all fours, was a figure too small to be an adult, but too strange to be a child. Sandra's scream caught in her throat. She ducked below the windowsill, her heart hammering, praying it hadn't seen her. The next day, she mentioned it to Mr. Kenneth during a chance meeting at the gate. "You've seen it too?" he whispered, looking around nervously. "I thought I was going mad. I see it every week. Sometimes it comes to my door, just stands there." That's when Sandra made a decision. If she was going to expose this landlord, she needed proof. She ordered a security camera online, a small discreet model with night vision and motion detection. It cost 45,000 naira from her dwindling severance money, but it was worth it. She installed it on her balcony, angled towards the compound, and waited. The footage she captured over the next 2 weeks would change everything. The first night, nothing. The second night, nothing. But on the third night, at 2:17 a.m., the motion sensor triggered. Sandra reviewed the footage the next morning, and what she saw made her drop her phone. The shadow was real. It moved across the compound slowly, methodically, pausing at each apartment door. It had no features, no face, just a void in the shape of something humanoid. And behind it, the crawling figure. Sandra zoomed in until her hands shook. It was a child, or something shaped like a child, but its movements were wrong. It crawled backward, its head twisted at an impossible angle, and from its mouth came that cry, that horrible, deep, mechanical cry. But the most damning part of the video came at 2:34 a.m. A man emerged from the main gate, the landlord's private entrance that led to a separate building at the back of the compound. He was elderly, dressed in white, carrying something in his hands. The camera's night vision wasn't clear enough to see his face perfectly, but his actions were unmistakable. He walked to the center of the compound, knelt, and poured something on the ground. Then he spoke, his mouth moving in what looked like incantations. The shadow entity and the crawling figure moved toward him, circling him like obedient dogs. Sandra's blood ran cold. This was it. This was the proof.
They chose dawn, 5:30 a.m. on a Saturday. The spiritual significance wasn't lost on them. Dawn is when darkness retreats. Dawn is when light conquers. All 12 tenants gathered in the compound, some of them meeting for the first time despite living in the same building for months. They held hands, forming a circle in the exact spot where the landlord had performed his ritual. Sandra led the prayer, her voice strong despite her fear. Father God, we stand on this cursed ground and we declare it holy. We break every covenant made with darkness. We destroy every buried object of witchcraft. We nullify every altar raised against us. By the blood of Jesus, we are free. The others joined in, their voices rising in power and authority. They prayed in English, in Igbo, in Yoruba, in tongues that flowed like rivers. And then something extraordinary happened. The ground beneath their feet grew warm, then hot. Mrs. Ifeoma gasped and jumped back as the spot where they were standing began to crack. Smoke rose from the fissures, not fire smoke, but something darker, thicker. Keep praying, Mr. Kenneth shouted. Don't stop.
They intensified their prayers, and the smoke grew denser until it formed shapes, shadows that twisted and writhed in the morning light before dissipating like mist under a strong sun. Then, with a sound like breaking glass, they felt it. The shift, the release, the freedom. It was 6:15 a.m. when the landlord's door burst open. Chief Obina Onosu emerged, and Sandra saw him clearly for the first time. He looked ancient, far older than any human should look. His skin was grey, his eyes sunken, his body bent, but his voice when he spoke was filled with fury. "What have you done?" he screamed, stumbling towards them. "What have you done? You've destroyed everything, my protection, my wealth, my power." "Your curse, you mean," Sandra said, stepping forward with her phone held high. "Your witchcraft that fed on innocent people, your evil that destroyed lives." "You don't understand," he hissed. "I gave you shelter. I gave you beautiful homes. The price was small, just your prosperity, just your destinies. I needed to feed the covenant to stay alive, to stay rich." The tenant stared in horror as he continued his confession, too far gone in his rage to care about consequences. "My father made the covenant," he continued, his voice breaking, "when he built this compound 50 years ago. Blood sacrifices, buried fetishes, rituals at the crossroads. Every tenant who fails makes me stronger. Their losses become my gains. It's been working for decades." Sandra was recording everything, every word, every confession. "But you, He pointed at her with a trembling finger. "You brought church here. You brought prayers. You broke it. You broke everything." As if to punctuate his words, the old man collapsed, just folded in on himself like a puppet whose strings were cut. The tenants rushed forward, but Mr. Kenneth, who had some medical training, checked for a pulse and shook his head. "He's gone." The landlord, who had fed on others' suffering, had nothing left to sustain him once his dark covenant was broken. The police came, the investigations began. Chief Obinna Nwosu's body was taken away and his property was searched. What they found in his private quarters made even hardened officers recoil. Altars covered in blood, jars containing unidentifiable organic matter, photographs of every tenant arranged around candles, ritualistic objects buried at strategic points around the compound. The case made local news. Landlords' occult activities exposed by tenants read the headlines. People came from all over Port Harcourt to see the compound, to pray, to cleanse the land. But the tenants, all 12 of them, left. Despite the landlord being dead, despite prayers and cleansing ceremonies, none of them could live in that place again. The memories were too heavy, the trauma too deep. Sandra moved out in early June, finding a modest single room in a different part of town. It wasn't as beautiful as her former apartment, but it was clean. It was safe, and most importantly, it was free from curses. Slowly, miraculously, her life began to rebuild. Her health returned. No more mysterious illnesses every 7 days. A former colleague called with a job opportunity at a smaller company. It paid less than her previous position, but she accepted gratefully. And one evening in July, her phone rang with a number she thought she'd never see again. "Sandra?" Chidi's voice was thick with emotion. "I don't know what happened to me. It's like I was under a spell. I said terrible things. I abandoned you when you needed me most. I don't even recognize the person I was. Please, can we talk?" Sandra listened to his apology, heard the genuine confusion and regret in his voice, and realized that he too had been a victim. The landlord's curse didn't just affect the tenants, it poisoned everything they touched, their relationships, their jobs, their minds. "Chidi," she said gently, "I forgive you, but I'm not the same person anymore. I've been through fire and I've come out stronger. If we're going to rebuild this relationship, we do it slowly, with honesty, with God at the center." "Anything," he agreed. "I'll do anything." By September, Sandra had started a blog documenting her experience, not for attention, but to warn others, to teach people what she had learned the hard way. "When something seems too good to be true," she wrote in her first post, "it usually is. Do your research, ask questions, meet the landlord, talk to current tenants, trust your instincts, and above all, never underestimate the power of prayer and community." Her post went viral. Hundreds of people commented with similar stories: suspicious landlords, cursed properties, sudden unexplained losses. And with each story shared, Sandra realized something profound. She hadn't just survived, she had become a voice for the voiceless, a warning for the unsuspecting, a testament to the power of faith and courage. The compound at GRA Phase 2 still stands today, empty, abandoned, waiting for a buyer brave enough to purchase land with such a dark history. The for sale signs have been there for 8 months now, growing faded in the Port Harcourt sun. Occasionally, people drive by slowly, pointing at the building, telling the story of the landlord's curse. Some say you can still hear strange sounds at 2 a.m. if you stand by the gate. Others claim the land needs serious spiritual cleansing before anyone can live there safely. But Sandra doesn't think about that place anymore. She's moved forward, carrying the lessons but not the pain. She's learnt what her grandmother tried to teach her long ago. Onyekwe chiekwe. When a person says yes, their personal God says yes. But you must also be wise about what you say yes to. And perhaps most importantly, she learned that beauty is not always a blessing, that discernment is more valuable than desire, that the company of good neighbors in a modest home is worth more than isolation in a mansion, and that sometimes the hardest battles we fight are the ones we never see coming, fought not with weapons, but with faith, with prayer, with the courage to stand together and say enough. If you are watching this from anywhere in the world, we want to hear from you. Tell us in the comments where you are watching from, and we'll share with you the exact location of this compound in Port Harcourt for those who want to know. Share your own stories of mysterious occurrences, spiritual battles, or lessons learned the hard way. Remember, due diligence isn't just practical wisdom, it's spiritual protection. Research before you rent, pray before you pay, and always trust that gut feeling that tells you something isn't right. This is Tales by CHN Stories, bringing you real stories from the heart of Africa. Stories that warn, stories that teach, stories that remind us that we are never truly alone in our battles. Subscribe, hit that notification bell, and join us next week when we bring you another powerful tale from the African experience. Until then, stay wise, stay prayerful, and may your homes be filled with blessings, not curses. Ndewo, Odabo. Go well.